Good morning, friends. This is Christopher Davis-Shannon, and today we're hopping over to the Mediterranean to speak with the amazing Ukulele Nick over in Greece. Nick, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm fine, Chris. How are you?
I'm wonderful. It's so lovely to see you from afar. And before we get into talking too much, would you mind just playing us a song to start us off?
Sure. I was always going in for every sort of vitamin I'd read about, but I find I'm filled up with what the doctors recommended as a build-up. Now I'd like to make it known that since I met you, I have thrown the theories out. You agree with me, though you're not my vitamins A, B, C, D. I'd like to dunk you in my coffee and spread you on my bread. I wish that you were in the highball going to my head. Dear, when you sit across the table, I'm then like the giant in the fable. Fee, fi, fo, fum. I'm overcome with a cannibalistic feeling. I'd like to smother you with mushrooms and everything. And I claim you'd be a dainty dish to set before a king. Sweetheart, if I could obtain you as part of my daily menu, I'd like to dunk you in my coffee and spread you on my bread. I'd like to smother you with mushrooms and everything. And I claim you'd be a dainty dish to set before a king. Sweetheart, if I could obtain you as part of my daily menu, I'd like to dunk you in my coffee and spread you on my bread.
And that song was entitled "I'd Like to Dunk You in My Coffee," which is one of those beautiful old novelty tunes that have kind of been left by the wayside. And Nikos is one of those amazing people out there who has been bringing new life to these old songs. And much like you, I have a huge affinity for these songs as well, obviously. And what brought you to this music? I can't imagine that this is the music you've been listening to your entire life, right?
Well, no, that wasn't. But songs like this, when I first discovered them, I mean, it was a really real revelation for me. So um, I thought, what are they? I know jazz, right? I've heard Coltrane and Parker, and Joy Pass as a guitarist, as a previous, used to play guitar before jazz guitar. So I said, and I was listening to all these 20s and 30s and before 20 stuff, and it was great. It was brilliant. The lyrics, the harmonization in the tunes, the melodies. I didn't know this kind of jazz quote really existed before Parker or before
Right.
the bebopers and so on. So I'm facing those songs that I've found out from Cliff Edwards and players, Johnny Marvin and players like that from you guys. I mean, I gotta tell you here that you're one of my heroes. You're
Thank
so into this music, and when I was discovering it, I was listening to you and all these verses and lyrics and all that. Lucas Brown, the other guy that I was gathering information from,
Dave
and I was
Remser,
really
whose website I'll
overwhelmed.
link to below because he is an amazing resource for people that wish to
Amazing,
sing songs,
amazing, amazing
and a
place of
great person
songs.
on top of it.
Yeah. So I was taking this information. I was really overwhelmed and starting to not like but love the music itself. So I was more into this, you know, uh, little by little, and started to appreciating novelty tunes, start songs, the way they approached waltzes and swing tunes just before the bebop era came, because I really didn't have a clue what was
that all about before bebop, uh,
Yeah.
2 years back. So I owe you guys, a big thanks. And I got to tell you that I'm really honored to be here talking with you, being one of my idols. So
I'm so happy to have you here. It's great to talk to people that are also as obsessed with this music as I am. A lot of people have it as, especially in the ukulele world, it's very common to know a few of these tunes. Things such as 5'2" or Ain't She Sweet. These are songs that are just very typical in the ukulele idiom, but there are tens of thousands of other songs out there from this era that people
nobody
don't
knows that,
play,
probably
and
no
some of
one
them are
will
terrible.
discover because it's our grandfather's songs that will never, of course, being Greek, this music, as you can understand, wasn't my forefathers' music. I mean,
Sure.
I've grown up with other kinds of music and all that. But since I've loved Broadway songs all my life, movies, and jazz music in general, this really caught my attention for good. And one thing that I've, I've said to myself, there are a lot of resources out there. Okay, you can play 5'2", any way you like, and it's beautiful that everyone that's the ukulele for can play it, put a couple of chords in this, mix the whole thing, and play it. But I thought, what if I really transcribe what the composers wrote on the piece of music from the piano or from the ukulele symbols that are on them, and try to play them all, not for playing them all, but to give, a rigid idea, a concrete idea of what the music sounded like on the ukulele back in the day. Because if they didn't play those diminished or augmented chords or these passing chords all the time, they wouldn't have written it down, would they? Would they? No.
Right, right. And if you listen to the earlier, you mentioned Cliff Edwards and Johnny Marvin. If you listen to their playing, a lot of that is integrated into it, and it's so important, but has been left by the side over the years in lieu of these much simpler chords, which work and are fine, but it loses a little bit of the charm without having all of those passing tones in there guiding you.
Anyway, I've studied bebop for theory and practice playing the guitar and the bass right before that, and I've seen all those changes, substitutions, and all that jazz musicians really know, and they're very easy for them. But I wouldn't expect these funny chords going on in the turnarounds and so on in those tunes, which things were more straightforward, right? But no, sir, they were in there. So I wanted to, note that down and say, and then I've thought, why don't I make a site, blog, where I can put all these things that I can transcribe in. And I've made Timpan Ukulele, which is a growing site. I've studied it myself. I've transcribed something like 250 pieces and all that. And then I said, wait a minute, this is not my music. I'm not composing it, all right? So why don't I share it with anyone, with people? And why don't I, invite people to join me in this and build a site that we can have 500 of these masterpieces transcribed for ukulele, or 1,000 or something. So I invited some people. Lynn from Virginia, Richmond, Virginia, has joined, and Dave Galvert from the UK joined. And now we are 3, and we want other people to croon in our little site and give their own opinion and their own interpretation of their songs in the site as crooners, as guest crooners. So I thought this is a procedure of, we can have everybody in. It's not my site, my songs.
And as you met, it's a
an
great
interpretation.
resource.
I really admire yours or somebody else's. You always get fresh ideas from people that, regardless if they're playing a year, half a year, or 20 years. That's my way of seeing it.
Absolutely. And yeah, everyone from beginner to advanced has something to add to the musical conversation. I think we all hear songs differently, and especially on uke, we all approach playing songs differently, and every one of those opinions is valid. I'm going to link to Timpan Alley Uke down in the description here so everyone can visit here, because it really is a wonderful resource for people that wish to play these tunes and maybe step a little bit outside their comfort zone as well. A lot of the ukulele charts that we find online for many of these early tunes are very simplified versions of them, and they're really missing many of the chords, where Nikos has all of the the original chords in there, which are at least, even if you don't want to play them, it's worth knowing that they exist and
Exactly.
understanding
That's
how.
exactly what you know that music so well, and you really understand what I'm saying. It's good to have the original thing there. Simplify it if you cannot play it for now. I mean, play your five chord and your one chord and your C
Yeah,
and your
and that's
G7.
fine.
But when you get more advanced, it's really nice to have a resource that you have everything in there, and you can pick and choose and pick what you.
Exactly. And one thing that I do with my students when they are learning a new song is we always look at contemporary versions of the songs. What people play now. You know, you think of things such as Bye Bye Blackbird. We think of the changes for that in contemporary society. Really is the Miles Davis changes of that song, not the Ray Henderson changes, which are quite a bit different. So I make my students learn what's the accepted one, but then they have to go back to the publication year, find the original sheet music to see what the composer intended, but then find 3 to 5 recordings recorded in the first year and listen to those to hear not just what the composer intended, but what the bands in the day were interpreting that music as, which is also quite different. And it's the thing is, music is interpretation. Just because it's what the composer writes in the beginning might be what they intended, but then Louis Armstrong took it or Fats Waller took it and did something totally different with it, and that became the version we listened to. And it's important to understand the foundation that the music
Yes,
comes.
but it's nice to know the procedure, know the process, how the song,
Exactly, the progression of it. And one of my favorite examples of that is actually "Tonight You Belong to Me," which we all know in the ukulele world. We've all played that. So the original chart of that, hey, the verses are beautiful to that song. I'm sure you've played them before, but some of the listeners here may not have. The verses are beautiful and really framing context to the lyrics of the chorus as well and give a complete story. But it's also, you and I were talking about this before we hit record, how popular waltzes were back then. And that song was originally a waltz. It was in 3/4. And it works beautifully, but it also did not have the two-part vocal harmony that we hear now that we're used to. That was added in the 1940s by a vocal group, and then it became popular. And that was the version used by Steve Martin and Bernadette Peters in The Jerk, which then became the standard version that we all know. But the progression of the tune, it started out as this waltz ballad. It's so different from what we conceptualize that.
which I think, I think we're lucky. We have this vast information coming through the internet
Yes.
nowadays, and we can have both or 3 or 4 versions of something, compare, mix and match, and then do our own. But it's always good to have that as a legacy behind you, to know what the verse is, where you started, and when you're going for the lyrics, as far as the lyrics are concerned. And another thing that drew my attention in this music is the way people felt back in the day. They felt so romantic. Sometimes they felt teasing girls or boys or comrades or things like that. And all this emotion has to be translated. In my point of seeing things, if you are to play a song from that era, you better start digging the feeling in. See,
Right.
So-
And context matters for these songs. You have to understand the thinking process back then a little bit more and what was socially acceptable as well. It's different than a modern song.
some of them were, used bad words, or they were insulting to some, categories, even can be called racist or so. But nevertheless, they carry a big, treasure in them. So I'm really excited after, getting into that, starting with that, because my my experience with uke is only 2 years old, to something. I've dropped everything back for 10 years, and then my daughter wasn't keen enough on taking piano lessons at some point, and I said, why don't I take her a ukulele and try to, teach her? She didn't like that either, so I said, why don't I take it? It was a very cheap one, something like costing 20 euros or something. And I took it in my hands and said, oops, I can do something with that. At that point, I met you get to Brown, Ukulele Hoof, Andy Eastwood, guys like that who caught my attention, and then, set fire to the whole thing.
Yeah, and then you haven't put it down since.
Yes, and to be honest, I've started collecting music too. Now you will tell me, well, wait a minute, collecting is an expensive hobby, right? I mean, you to buy. I'm not really buying the original hard copies. I'm downloading and stealing, if you want.
Yes.
Charlie, listening.
We won't
Digital
tell you.
copies. So I've something like in my trunk now, right now. There's something like 7,000 copies of music from back in the era. Some of them are under copyright law still. Some of them are in public domain, but it's growing. And I intend to use it for the best of everybody. I've uploaded in a big host, and I'm sharing it with 15 people as it is. I mean, it's not my music. I don't want to, keep it for myself. I'm not passionate to be the best virtuoso or something. That was never my intention. My intention is to try to assimilate and imitate in the good way, interpret, if you will, this music as best as my sentiment and soul, gives me the opportunity to do so.
Certainly. And Nikos, would you mind playing us another one of those old tunes?
I'd love to.
And that, of course, was It's Only a Paper Moon. Something that Nikos has started to do recently. When I was first acquainted with him, he was mostly singing the songs along with all the verses, but recently he has started putting out a lot more chord melody and fingerstyle arrangements of these old tunes, such as that. And I was curious if you could share with us your process in making a chord melody song, because I think we all approach it in a different manner, and we all have something to learn from each other as far as how we put these together.
This is absolutely true. I'm learning as it is, as we speak from every one that's arranging and try to plays finger style. To be honest, I've put a low G on my tenor ukulele.
Cheater.
Because you need some bass notes. I love those bass notes. Part of my approach to that is doing some bass work with that.
Right, and that's something that's often left out on out of necessity with low G. We do a lot more inversions.
Or some things like that. You can approach the chords. Well, my approach on that is not really as is basic and I'd say fundamental. I want to use all the chords we were talking about before, or most of them, passing chords that will drive me with either melodic, voicing guideline to the sonic arrangement itself. And I want to create something that's accessible for people who can play a little. Well, really a beginner can't play chord melody. You need to, adjust on the instrument, find your way through bar chords and stuff like that. But if you're an advanced beginner, let's say, or an intermediate player, you might as well start playing voicings, challenging maybe voicings at some point, but this will, if you don't have the challenge, you know that better than me. If you don't have the challenge, you're not getting anywhere. You're not getting better. So I thought, I'm building this for myself, and the way I'm saying things, preferring much to underline, to brighten the melodic line, and then underneath that, a couple of bass lines or some lines with guide tones to connect all that. Why don't I give a simple version to people, a simpler version, what I think a simple version is, and a more advanced version, so they can start from there, start from the basics, begin to getting familiar and acquainted with the song, and then build up from the basics, from the melody or from the chords used and all that. And I think from what I can see, this is a good idea that, helps people progress and advance on their quest, because everybody can listen to Jake. By the way, I was having a lesson last night with a girl from California, Christina, and I said, the guy's name, Jake, what, I cannot pronounce it. I say, you're an American and you cannot pronounce it. I cannot pronounce it either. So whatever the name is, Chimagaburo or something.
Yes.
You see that guy playing, you say, I want to play like this. It's only natural, right? It's not arrogant. It's like, because you want to advance. That's what art is for. You want to, get on doing better. But if you, remain static and you see that and you don't start from the basics, you don't go anywhere. So you need to have a starting point. And I try to give that starting point and then advance on the more sophisticated stuff, let's say. Well, I'm trying. It's in my first efforts. I'm not saying I'm succeeding, but at least I think I'm on a good, route to go.
Yeah. And I think that's a great way to approach it. I was having a discussion with one of my friends a few weeks ago who's a plectrum guitar player, doing Carl Kress and style playing, which is similar to what we do chord melody-wise on uke. They just have more notes to work with. But he insists that arrangements should only present triad chords, just the simplest building blocks, and to give the player room to add anything that they want, to add all of our passing tones and our sevenths without feeding them every single aspect of it, because then you have no room for interpretation once everything else is in there, and interpretation is really the key to making something your own as opposed to just directly playing someone else's. So I think what you're talking about, building it up from the very basics, is so important. And for understanding the tune, because you're not going to understand why we have a diminished seventh chord here if you're not understanding the major chord that's coming before it, the major chord that's coming after it, and what's that acting as a substitution for a dominant chord much of the time. But if you don't see that movement, it's just another grouping of four notes on the fingerboard.
Yeah, and if you see that closely, sometimes the way I see it is, it's simple. You have to really understand the difficult stuff to understand that what great players are playing sometimes, not all of the times, of course, but most of the times are simple. You have to move one finger to get that ninth note or the 13th note to make all the difference, all that passing note. It's just a plip, plip, plip that you're doing all the time. So when you really focus on something and you have it written and you have it analyzed, people are helped to understand that, okay, man, this is not a big deal. As I advance, as I go forward as a player, I might as well play that too. So my ambition, in quote, is to be real honest with that music and help people understand that it's not that difficult to achieve as soon as they get the basics down and they understand what's the idea about. For instance, in my latest jazzuk, by the way, the term was given to me by an American girl, said it was great. I didn't know the term anyway. So I named that, tips and secrets, stuff like that. And it's when you get a chord shape like G7 on the third fret C7 on the third fret that we know, you can always, by moving one or two little fingers, get different colorings of notes and tones. That's not hard to conceive, is it? It might be hard to play a couple of chords with that shapes, But if you understand that that's what's happening in jazz or in tunes in general, it'll be, I've seen great tutorials from you or by Phil Doleman or people that really know what they're doing, and people are getting better with those. They get info and they can, process that info.
Certainly, yeah. You're talking about that C7th shape, really based off of our open position A7th voicing.
Yes.
To add a sharp 5 to that or a flat 9, which we think of these extended voicings. Oh my God, there's something
Sharp 5 flat 9.
one note, right?
Or a sharp 5 flat 9 or a flat 5 sharp flat 9. If you do that, you end up with the F sharp 7 chord, which is actually the substitution of the whole thing.
Exactly. So it's so important to understand those basic positions first before we get into adding everything to it, because it's easier to see how similar they are, as you were saying. And especially I find it easier on uke than a lot of other instruments, because we're constrained to 4 notes at a time. So when we go to play, say, a dominant 9th chord, something has to drop. We don't have enough. We can't play every note physically in the chord. It's impossible. So what's our concession that we can make to make that 9th chord? And that decision matters so much in arranging as well. What isn't there as well as what is there. And I think that's something we don't think enough about, is when it's okay to drop certain voices from a chord.
Draw me in that puzzle, because it's a nice positive puzzle. You're puzzled every time which voicing you're going to keep, what note you're going to drop. And I find this idea and this process fascinating. That's why I was drawn into arranging, let's say, for fingerstyle.
Yeah, to me, arranging is exactly as you said. It's problem solving, is what it is, and there are numerous correct answers. Yeah, and I've always someone that has loved math and logic my whole life, and that's how I approach arranging. A lot of the arranging I'll do is away from my instruments. I just whip out the pad and paper and go like, well, I know the basic song, so how do we get from here to here, and in what ways can we get there? And sometimes I get back to my instrument and it sounds terrible. And sometimes it sounds great, but just
you're really excited when you get the idea right? When you solve the problem, you say, "Oh, I did that."
Yes,
and it's a nice victory. So, what I've understood, and it's very relaxing for me, is that people that they are great musicians too, not like me, really great musicians, are taking small and little joys out of things like that.
Certainly.
And that's the whole point of it. You can keep on going and live your whole life by getting a simple little victory and joy and thrill by one single 9th or 13th or tonic or 5th note that you put in there. That's the magic of it.
Absolutely. Fully agree.
We're like kids, even if we are beginners, intermediates, or advanced, or maestros or stuff like that. We are still kids that need to get joy out of music.
Right. And always learning through that joy as well, which is so important. Nikos, would you mind playing us one final tune before we get out of here?
Oh, I'll be honored. Thank you.
When the world goes wrong, as it's bound to do, and you've broken down Cupid's bow, and you long for the girl you used to love, made of long ago, why light your pipe, bid sorrow goodbye, blow the smoke from your altar of dreams, and read the face of your dream girl there, the love that is just what it seems, the girl of my dreams is the sweetest girl of all the girls I know. sweet coil like a rainbow train fades in the afterglow. The blue of her eyes and the gold of her hair are the blend of the western skies, and the moonlight beams on the girl of my dreams. Says the sweetheart of Sigma Chi. And the moonlight beams on the girl of my dreams. Says the sweetheart of Sigma Chi.
Nikos, thank you so much for taking the time out of your evening, my morning, to join me and talk about ukulele playing these wonderful, wonderful songs. It's great to see you on the screen and have a chat with you.
Me too. I'm really honored to be here with you, and I thank you for the nice chat and for the nice afternoon coffee we had together. Morning.
And if you wouldn't mind, could you just play us a little bit of exit music to get us out of here?
I'd be glad to. Thank you, Chris.